"Ma'am," the twins whispered softly. "We know what's wrong. We can fix it." Kimberly Caldwell looked down at them, ready to snap. Her company was crashing around here, $3 billion vanishing before her eyes. A team of 10 elite specialists had already failed, and now, in the lowest moment of her career, two 8-year-old girls with matching ginger curls were tugging at her attention. Actual children, claiming they could solve what the brightest experts in the industry couldn't. But she had run out of options, when a powerful CEO handed two little girls 15 minutes to save her empire. She never imagined what would follow. When a janitor walked in and found his daughters surrounded by high-ranking executives, he never expected his carefully buried past to surface. And when those twins placed their tiny hands on that keyboard, they didn't know that one courageous act would pull their father out of a lifetime of guilt and thaw the heart of a woman who'd long forgotten how to feel. Earlier that morning, Kimberly had been calmly reviewing quarterly projections in her corner office, immaculate in her tailored suit. Her long, wavy blonde hair was twisted into a flawless slow bun. Everything in her life was controlled, calculated, predictable. Then her CTO burst through the door, pale and breathless. "We've been hacked. It's catastrophic." The operations center resembled a war zone. Screens glowed with urgent red warnings. 10 cyber specialists hammered wildly at their keyboards, sweat trickling despite the icy air conditioning. The virus running through their systems, elegant, complex, impossibly, was draining client accounts at a speed that made Kimberly's stomach twist. "Report," she demanded. "We can't isolate it," her lead engineer said, voice trained. "It rewrites itself. Every time we counter it, it changes. We've never seen anything like this." She watched the numbers rise. $3 billion gone. Her team, the best she'd invested in, couldn't stop it. The malware slipped through their defenses like smoke, always ahead of them, almost taunting their efforts. Everything she'd sacrificed, the relationships, friendships, entire pieces of her personal life, was collapsing in front of her, and she couldn't do a thing to stop it. Meanwhile, Martin Ashford wasn't even supposed to be in the Caldwell Technologies building that morning. He worked nights, quietly cleaning floors while the world slept. But when a coworker begged him to cover the daytime shift, he'd reluctantly agreed. His daughters had been ecstatic. "Daddy, we finally get to see where you work," Emma had squealed, practically vibrating with excitement. "Please, please, please," Ella had chimed in, her curls bouncing with every word. It was their school break, and they'd been asking for weeks. Martin had run out of excuses. He arrived with the twins beside him, their matching backpacks making them look like perfect mirror images. The daytime building felt unfamiliar, full of suits, bustling energy, and the hum of constant activity. Nothing like the quiet nights he knew. He brought them to the tiny janitor's break room, an old couch, a scratched table, a tired coffee maker. "Stay here, okay?" he said, kneeling to eye level. "I just need to grab supplies from storage. Do not leave this room." "We promise, Daddy," Emma said seriously. "Cross our hearts," Ella added. He kissed their foreheads and stepped away. The twins made it 5 whole minutes. "Do you hear that?" Emma whispered, listening toward the hallway. Raised voices, rushed footsteps. "Something urgent, something wrong." "We're supposed to stay here," Ella said, even as she stood up. "Just one quick look," Emma agreed. They slipped out, following the noise up the stairwell. With every floor, the tension grew thicker, shouting, frantic typing, a crackling sense of panic in the air. The air was so tense you could practically taste it. At the entrance of an enormous operations center, the twins froze. Dozens of adults clustered around towering screens filled with streams of rapidly shifting code. Complex, mesmerizing, and dangerous. At the center of the chaos stood a blonde woman from before, her face drained of color, her fists clenched so hard the knuckles had gone white. Emma and Ella understood instantly. The patterns, the panic, the urgency. A cyber attack, and the attacker was winning. They exchanged a single look, that silent twin conversation only they could have. "Should we step in? What if they get mad? What if Dad finds out?" But then Emma remembered something. Months earlier, when they'd passed an elderly man struggling with grocery bags. Without hesitation, Martin had rushed to help. "We help when we can," Girls, always. That's what makes us human. That memory made the choice for them. The twins stepped further into the room. Ella reached up and tugged gently on the woman's sleeve. Kimberly glanced down, startled to see two tiny girls with matching ginger curls standing in the center of her crisis. Yes? Kimberly snapped, her patience worn dangerously thin. Who are you? How did you even get in here? We can help, Ella said softly. What? Kimberly blinked at them. The virus, Emma added, pointing at the screens. We can stop it. For a moment, Kimberly could only stare. These were Childrina armed with backpacks and juice boxes, claiming they could fix a corporate emergency that had brought her experts to their knees. This is not a game, she warned, her voice turning sharp. Where are your parents? How did you get up here? Our dad works here, Emma answered quickly. He's getting supplies. But please, ma'am, we really can help. That's a polymorphic worm using recursive encryption. It's actually kind of genius. A what? A senior engineer said, spinning in his chair. It's rewriting itself every 37 seconds, Ella explained calmly, as if discussing homework. That's why you can't trap it, but it's leaving trace signatures in system memory. If you track the ghost footprints instead of the active code, you can predict its next hop and build a containment cage. The room fell utterly silent. Dozens of stunned adults stared at two little girls who spoke as if they'd authored a cybersecurity manual. Your father works here? Kimberly asked slowly. Doing what? He's a janitor, Emma replied simply. He usually works nights. He's covering someone's shift. The CTO stepped closer. Wide-eyed. How old are you? 8. They said together. Let them try, someone shouted. We've got nothing left to lose. Everything's already gone. Logic told Kimberly to say number. It was absurd, even reckless. But as she looked at the bleeding numbers on the screens and at the experts who had nothing left to offer, she made a choice she never thought she'd consider. Fine, she said. Give them a terminal. Emma and Ella moved with a confidence that stunned the room. Their fingers flew across the keyboard in perfect harmony, one typing, the other tracking, exchanging short, sharp phrases that knitted together into flawless strategy. Every adult watched them in breathless silence. Lines of code flooded the screen. The twins worked with impossible precision, their faces lit by the blue glow of monitors, their focus absolute. Kimberly stared, unable to look away. Who were these children? Minutes passed. The financial bleeding slowed. A moment later, the virus staggered, and then it stopped altogether. $3 billion sat frozen as safe and recoverable. The attack had been dismantled. The unthinkable had just happened. The operations center erupted in shock. Engineers rushed forward, scrolling through the clean, elegant trap the girls had constructed. How did you? Emma, Ella. A voice from the doorway sliced through the noise. A man's voice, he strangled, terrified. Martin Ashford stood frozen in the doorway, still wearing his janitor's uniform, a box of cleaning supplies slipping from his hands. His face had gone pale. His daughter saw his little girls were surrounded by executives and cybersecurity experts, their small hands resting on a keyboard they had no business touching. His worst fear had just become reality. What did you two do? He breathed. The twins spun around, and Kimberly noticed something that pierced straight through her icy composure. Raw fear in their eyes. Not fear of being punished, fear of letting their father down, fear of hurting him. Dad, you broken bar. We're sorry, Emma whispered, her voice trembling as tears threatened. We weren't supposed to leave the break room, Ella added, her voice cracking. We only wanted to help. The box hit the floor with a thud, bottles and rags spilling across the carpet, but Martin didn't notice. He crossed the room in seconds, scooping both girls into his arms. Kimberly expected anger, shouting, scolding, but instead, she watched a man who scrubbed her floors at night cling to his daughters like he'd been drowning without them. I'm proud of you, Martin choked out, emotion thick in every word. I am so proud of you. The twins burst into full tears, their relief pouring out all at once. We thought you'd be mad, Emma sobbed. Never, Martin said firmly. He pulled back just enough to cup their faces, wiping their tears with his thumbs. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to hide who you are. I'm sorry I let my past dim your future. Kimberly watched them, a strange ache twisting in her chest. When had anyone last looked at her with such pure, Unconditional love. The CTO stepped forward carefully. Zero broken bar. Whoever you are, a broken bar. Your daughters just saved this entire company. They're the most gifted. Oh wait, a senior engineer cut him off, staring at Martin as if seeing a ghost. You're broken bar. Martin Ashford. The Martin Ashford. You created the Fortress Protocol. You worked at Quantum Defense Systems. You were a legend. Not now, Martin said quietly, his tone gentle but immovable. He stood, keeping his daughters close. Thank you for letting them help, but that's enough. His posture made it clear. The conversation was over. Come on, girls, he murmured. Wait, Kimberly said, her voice cutting through the room. Martin paused, exhausted and weary. Your daughters saved my company, Kimberly said softly, as so softly that the entire room fell silent. They saved everything I have built. Please see broken bar. Let me thank them properly. How? Martin asked guardedly. Dinner tomorrow night. My treat. That's not necessary, he said immediately. I insist. Kimberly glanced at Emma and Ella, who were watching her with hopeful, excited eyes. They deserve to be celebrated. Please, Miss Caldwell. Kimberly, she corrected gently. And I won't take no for an answer. The least I can do is buy them pizza. Martin hesitated. His instinct told him to stay guarded, but then he saw the twins' pleading expressions. Please, Daddy, Emma whispered. It's just dinner, Ella added softly. Martin looked at his girls, then at Kimberly, and something inside him loosened. All right, he said at last. Dinner. The next evening, Kimberly arrived at the restaurant expecting stiff small talk and awkward silence. She was completely unprepared for what actually happened. She laughed, truly laughed for the first time in years. Emma animatedly told a long, dramatic story about a squirrel they'd named Algorithm who had learned how to infiltrate their bird feeder. So we had to engineer a fix, Alice said, waving her hands excitedly. We built a pulley system with counterweights so only small birds could land on it. Did it work? Kimberly asked, genuinely curious. For 3 days, Emma said proudly. Then Algorithm cracked the pulley system and destroyed it. Honestly, we had to respect the hustle. Kimberly burst into lateral, unrestrained laughter. It felt strange and wonderful, as if she were hearing her own voice for the first time. Across the table, Martin watched his daughters with a tender expression that made her chest tighten. When was the last time anyone had looked at anything, much less Anya, with that kind of pure, unconditional affection? What made you start your company? Emma asked suddenly, tilting her head. I wanted to prove that I could, Kimberly said, then paused. Why was she being this honest? I wanted to prove that I was worth something. You're worth lots of things, Alice said matter-of-factly. At least 12, maybe even 15. Kimberly felt something inside her crack. 15? That many? We can write a list if you want, Emma offered with total seriousness. When the twins eventually became absorbed in their coloring menus, Kimberly turned to Martin. Curiosity had been eating at her since the moment she learned who he really was. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Martin looked up, guarded but not cold. Depends on the question. Why is one of the most brilliant cybersecurity architects in the field working as a janitor? For a long moment, Martin said nothing. His jaw flexed, his fingers tightening around his glass. Kimberly opened her mouth to apologize, but he finally spoke. Because I couldn't do it anymore, he said softly. The work I love at a broken bar, the work that defined me, broken bar, I couldn't do it without remembering what it cost. What did it cost you? She asked, barely above a whisper. Martin glanced at the twins to make sure they were still focused on their drawings. When he spoke again, his voice was fragile. My wife, Grace. Kimberly's breath stalled in her chest. It happened a year ago, he continued. I was pulling a late night at one of many. A critical update. The twins were with me at the office. They loved being around the tech. He paused, gathering himself. Grace called around 7. She said she'd come get us and take us to dinner. The twins loved this little Italian spot downtown. I told her I needed another hour. His voice cracked, just slightly. She said, "Hey, I'll leave now. See you soon, love." Kimberly felt her heart twist. She never made it, Martin whispered. A drunk driver ran a red light going nearly double the limit. Hit her broadside. They told me she died instantly. A broken bar like that was supposed to make it easier. Martina broken bar. Kimberly breathed, her hand instinctively reaching across the table. if I'd left work on time, he said, voice breaking, if I'd taken the girls home earlier, if I'd said no to one more project, one more late night at Broken Bar, she wouldn't have been on that road. She'd still be alive, she'd still be here, she'd still be their mother. It wasn't your fault, Kimberly said softly. Wasn't it? He whispered. The anguish in his eyes was shattering. I chose work over going home, and she died because of that choice. That's not true, Kimberly said firmly. You chose to finish something important. That's not the same as choosing work over family. And a drunk driver chose to get behind the wheel. That burden isn't yours. Martin looked down, shaking his head. Logically a broken bar, I know, but guilt doesn't care about logic. It just eats at you, every day. He exhaled deeply. So I quit. 3 weeks after the funeral. Cashed out everything, set up trusts for the girls, took the first job I could find that had nothing to do with tech. I thought if I ran far enough from the work that destroyed my life, I could outrun the guilt. Did it help? Kimberly asked. Number. His laugh was hollow. It just left me empty, like I'd erased who I was. But at least I had time with Emma and Ella. At least I could be what I wasn't for Grace. Kimberly was quiet for a moment, absorbing it all. What you didn't know, she said gently, was that the twins never stopped coding. Martin sighed. They told you? They hid a laptop under the bed, Kimberly said with a soft smile. They kept their passion a secret to protect you. They love you deeply, she added. They're my entire world, Martin said simply. They're the reason I get up in the morning a Broken Bar even on the days when I feel like I don't deserve to. Kimberly looked at the small, brilliant, shattered, fiercely devoted, and something deep within her shifted. Something dangerous, unexpected, and terrifyingly hopeful. You know what I think? She said softly. What? I think Grace would want you to live, Kimberly murmured. Really live, not just survive. She'd want you to let Emma and Ella grow into who they're meant to be. She'd want you to stop punishing yourself for being human. Martin's eyes shone, emotion rising too fast to contain. Yeah, Broken Bar, I don't know if I can, he whispered. I think you're stronger than you realize, she said gently. Her hand finally settled over his. Warm and steady. They stayed like that, connected, fragile, and beginning to help you two broken souls realizing that maybe, just maybe, healing wasn't impossible. Emma glanced up from her coloring. Daddy's smiling again, Ellen added with the seriousness of a tiny philosopher. Miss Kimberly makes him smile. Martin and Kimberly quickly withdrew their hands, suddenly aware of themselves, but the smiles lingered. That dinner shifted something between them, and after that, more meals followed. Weekend plans became routine, something Kimberly anticipated with a giddy excitement she hadn't felt since she was a teenager. The twins pulled her along to museums, bombarding her with impossible questions about ancient civilizations and whether the Egyptians had secretly understood early coding. One night, Martin made dinner at their cozy apartment, and Kimberly was stunned to discover he cooked like a professional. Watching him move around the kitchen, teaching the girls as they helped, she felt a quiet ache for a kind of warmth she'd never had, a sense of belonging. A Broken Bar family. You're staring, Martin murmured without looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. I'm observing, she corrected, though she couldn't hide her smile. Soon she was attending school events, as something she'd never imagined herself doing. She felt an unfamiliar swelling of pride during Emma's quantum computing presentation, and she cheered far too loudly when Ella won the spelling bee. One evening, sitting on their small balcony while the girls worked inside, Kimberly made a bold offer. I want you to work for me, she said, head of cybersecurity at Caldwell Technologies. Martin blinked in surprise. Kimberly, a Broken Bar, we need someone exceptional, she continued. Someone who understands how systems can break, someone who knows what it means to lose everything and wants to protect others from that kind of pain. I don't know if I'm ready. I'm not asking for an answer today. Just consider it. She hesitated, then added softly, and I want to sponsor a special program for gifted young coders. Emma and Ella would be perfect participants. Martin studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Why would you do that? Because watching you hold your girls in that operations center was the first time in a decade I felt something real, she admitted. Because you reminded me there's more to life than profit. Because a Broken Bar, she faltered. Because you what? he prompted. "Because I think you're brave," she said quietly. "And a broken bar. I want to learn how to be brave too." The change in their lives unfolded slowly, like snow thawing into spring, a steady and beautiful. Kimberly began leaving work at normal hours. Her assistant nearly fainted the first time she said, "We can finish that tomorrow." She went to the twins' school play, sitting beside Martin in the stiff auditorium chairs while Emma and Ella performed a hilarious skit about two robots learning emotions. Martin agreed to take on a small consulting project for Caldwell Technologies. The first time he laid his hands on a keyboard for work, they trembled. But Kimberly never pushed. She stayed close enough to help when he asked and far enough to give him peace when he needed it. The twins blossomed, no longer hiding their brilliance. They joined the gifted program Kimberly created and returned home each day buzzing with excitement about new projects. "Daddy, did you know machine learning can predict weather patterns?" Ella announced one evening. "And we're designing a program to detect food allergies before they become dangerous," Emma added proudly. Watching Emma brilliant, free, and thriving, Martin felt something he hadn't felt since losing Grace, peace. One evening, Kimberly attempted to help him cook. The results were catastrophic. "How did you manage to set water on fire?" Martin asked, torn between laughter and disbelief. "I have no idea," Kimberly replied, staring at the pot as if it had personally betrayed her. "I did exactly what you said. I told you to simmer, not summon the fires of destruction." The twins collapsed into laughter in the doorway as the two of them scrambled to contain the kitchen disaster. Later, after they'd given up on cooking and ordered pizza, they sat together on the living room floor surrounded by the twins' drawings. When Martin's hand brushed against Kimberly's, neither of them moved away. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" she asked gently. "For seeing us." His eyes softened. "For seeing me." Kimberly felt her throat grow tight. "Thank you for showing me what living actually looks like." Across the room, Emma and Ella exchanged a pair of knowing looks. Their father was smiling, really smiling, and the woman beside him watched him as if he were made of starlight. What grew between them wasn't dramatic or explosive. There was no cinematic moment, no grand declaration. It was simply two people who had been shattered in different ways, slowly stitching each other back together with steady presence and quiet courage. One evening, Martin pulled out his phone and showed Kimberly old pictures of his first office at Quantum Defense Systems. "That was before everything changed," he said quietly. "Nothing changed for the wars," she answered. "You didn't fall apart, you transformed." Maybe the shift wasn't a tragedy at all. Martin looked at her. Dana, this woman who'd once been all steel and drive, now softened by warmth and laughter and something dangerously close to home. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he confessed. Kimberly's breath caught. "I think I fell weeks ago. I was just too afraid to admit it." Their first kiss tasted like hope, like second chances and the possibility of brighter days ahead. 2 years after the data breach, Martin brought Kimberly back to the operations center. Emma and Ella hid around the corner, barely containing their excitement. They had been waiting for this moment. The room felt different now, less sterile, more lived in. Martin's team, or his team, since he had accepted the role of head of cybersecurity, had filled the space with photos, plans, and little pieces of their lives. "This is where everything changed for me," Martin said, lacing his fingers through Kimberly's. "Where 2 8-year-old girls taught me that hiding from my past wasn't honoring Grace. Living was." Tears gathered in Kimberly's eyes. "And this," he added softly, "is where I watched the coldest person I'd ever met reveal the warmest heart I've ever known." His smile was gentle. "Sure, this is where my life started again." He knelt, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Kimberly gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Kimberly Caldwell," Martin said, voice trembling, "you showed me that broken things can become beautiful, that endings can turn into beginnings, and that love doesn't need to be perfect to be true. Will you marry me?" Before she could answer, Emma and Ella burst from their hiding spot, squealing, "Say yes, say yes, say yes." Laughing through her tears, Kimberly nodded. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Martin slid the ring onto her finger as the twins threw themselves into the embrace, tangling all 4 of them into a pile of arms, tears, and pure joy. They stood together in the operations center, the place where it all started as a family rebuilt from broken pieces and brave choices. 6 months later, Kimberly stood in her office, the same office where her CTO once delivered the worst news of her career, and looked at the photo on her desk. All four of them at the beach, hair wild from the wind, smiling with unfiltered happiness. Martin stood behind her with his arms wrapped around her, while Emma and Ella constructed an impressively engineered sandcastle. The company had recovered and flourished, even. But that wasn't what she cherished most. What mattered was the sound of Martin's key turning in their front door each evening, the twins' eager voices describing their newest coding experiment, family dinners where everyone helped cook and nothing mysteriously ignited anymore. The life that came after, the life she never thought she could have. Martin looked at her the way someone looks at the center of their universe, and when the twins called her Kimberly, the name carried a warmth that felt unmistakably like family. He no longer tried to outrun his grief. Instead, he learned to live alongside it. Grace's memory was no longer a painful ache, it had become the solid ground their new life stood on, something cherished instead of mourned. Emma and Ella were thriving in the gifted program, already drawing interest from universities even though they were only 10. But more important than their genius was their joy. They were whole, confident, free to shine without hiding who they were. And Kimberly, the woman who had once built her success on steel and solitude, had discovered that the warmest thing in the world wasn't a booming quarter or a flawless metric. It was coming home to 3 people who loved her, not for her achievements, but for her heart. Sometimes salvation arrives from the places we least expect, from a janitor who once shaped the future, from 2 children who saw possibility where others saw barriers, from hearts brave enough to risk feeling again. In the end, it wasn't the data breach that rewrote their lives. It was 2 little girls who couldn't walk past someone hurting. 2 children who reminded a shattered father that life could still be gentle. 2 bright minds who showed a guarded CEO that love can't be measured like numbers on a screen. Martin never imagined that covering a coworker's shift would lead him to the greatest blessing of his life. Kimberly never dreamed that her company's worst crisis would bring her the love she never knew she needed. Emma and Ella never set out to save anyone, they simply wanted to help. And sometimes, that's how the best miracles begin, with small acts of courage, with the willingness to feel, with the bravery to begin again. Because none of us ever know what waits on the far side of our fear and broken bar, or how something breathtaking can rise from brokenness. If this story touched you even a little, let it linger. Let it remind you that kindness still makes a difference, compassion still transforms lives, and hope is never wasted. And if your heart feels a little lighter right now, share it. Because sometimes, offering hope is the most beautiful gift we can give.